Planning nutrition for ocean rowing. In the last couple of years, we've done lots of work with people competing in the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. And our first product, Long Range Fuel, was born of work that we did with two guys who went on to win the 2019 event. And if you want more information about how to optimize your nutrition for your row, you should go to resilientnutrition.com/ocean rowing. So in this video, I'll just share some of the simple principles that you can apply to your nutrition as you get ready for your own ocean row. First, if you go to that link that I just mentioned, you'll find a calculator that you can use to estimate your macronutrient intakes each day of the row. So the number of calories you'll need each 24 hours, but also your protein, carbohydrate, fat and fiber intakes. And to add some additional details, the recommended protein intake is 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. And this protein will help you support your immune function and of course hold on to your fat-free mass, your muscle mass, your bone mass, and so on while you're on board, which is very important during such long, strenuous exercise. Consuming 10 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories will help keep you regular while you're on board. The only consideration there is that for some people, consuming that much fiber could lead to some digestive discomfort. And this brings up an important point, which is that you should experiment with your nutrition for several months before the event. And while you're experimenting with your nutrition, you'll want to mimic the race conditions as much as possible. That means that during a rowing session each week, maybe it's your longest session of the week, which is likely on a Saturday or a Sunday, you'll practice consuming the same foods that you will on board. And ideally, you would mimic other aspects of the conditions too. So that might entail things like rowing at roughly race pace. You probably won't be able to mimic the weather conditions or the ocean conditions accurately, but hopefully you understand the point. And I suggest that you do this for at least 10 weeks or so leading up to the event. And during those sessions, you might aim to progressively increase the number of calories that you take on board per hour from week to week. In terms of carbohydrate and fat intakes, that's up to you. It's unclear right now whether high carb or high fat diets are best for this type of event. Much of the research on endurance nutrition is focused on high carbohydrate diets, and for good reasons. However, in such a long event, it's possible that very high fat, relatively low carb diets might actually be better for some people. And interestingly, there was a case study done of two ocean rowers who adapted to a high fat diet over the course of 2 weeks and then did a 24-hour rowing protocol in which they rowed for 2 hours on and 2 hours off, mimicking the race. And they found that after adapting to the high fat diet, they actually performed better. And in the context of ocean rowing, a high fat approach does have some advantages. One is that fat contains more calories per gram than carbohydrates. What that means is that if you are aiming to take on board a certain number of calories, if your diet is high in fat, then the total weight of the food that you take on board can be lower. And when you're rowing for several weeks, the mass of the boat is really important. So that's certainly an advantage. So I suggest that you experiment with the proportions of fat and carbohydrate in your diet for several months before the event and make sure that you've been sticking to whichever approach you choose for at least a few weeks before the event too. And then there are some other considerations too. So one, for example, is that you want to spread out your intake each day, and you'll probably benefit from assigning more of your calories, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins to the daytime than to the nighttime. And one thing that we've suggested to people previously is have separate daytime and nighttime packs. So maybe your daytime pack, which is all of the meals that you consume between, let's say, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., contains something like 2/3 to 3/4 of your 24-hour intake, and then the nighttime pack contains the remainder. And you might not want to eat large meals and instead spread out your intakes over a variety of smaller events each day. So regular snacks and occasional meals too. And then finally, it's important to recognize that you'll experience taste fatigue during the event. As it goes on, you'll probably find that you get tired of very sweet items, and that's one reason that long-range fuel isn't especially sweet. And you might find that you increasingly crave more savory foods and find these easier to consume. So making sure that you have a rotating menu is key. And to keep things simple, you might choose a 5 or a 10-day rotating menu, and a 10-day one is probably preferable. I hope that those tips help. As I said at the start, for more information, go to resilientnutrition.com/ocean rowing.